I see that as well. And on the technical side, we are ready to start. So, Roger, if you think we should kick it off, we can go ahead and get started.
Yeah, I believe we're starting on time. So
Oh,
this is a meeting of the Community Budget Review Committee, CBRC, and I call the meeting to order.
thanks so much, Roger. So glad to see everyone here. Thank you for joining and joining so promptly. I love when we get started on time. We sent out the agenda so you all have a sense of what we have on our plates today. It's a pretty big agenda. And I wanted to kick us off by acknowledging that the last several weeks have been quite unusual and stressful for many people in our communities. And I wanted to thank you all for making time to be here and continuing to engage on this important work. So thank you so much for joining and for all your engagement. I really appreciate all of you. So our first, we want to kick us off with some introductions. We do have some new members. Not all of the new members are on the call yet. But I'm going to go ahead and put my teacher hat on and do a bit of a roll call to move us through some introductions. And I'll go ahead and start with myself. I'm Alexandra Martin. I use she, her pronouns. My role here is as your staff liaison to the Community Budget Review Committee. I'm a finance program manager on the PPS team, and I've been here for about 2.5 years. I'm going to pass it along to Roger to introduce himself.
I'm Roger Kirschner. I use he, him as pronouns. I am a community member. Have been on CBRC. Well, my term ends next June, and that will be in my 15th year. I volunteered with the Portland Public Schools. I'm a Portland graduate, as are my daughters, and both my parents were teachers in the system.
Thanks so much. I'm going to pass it to Aaron, one of our new members.
I have to unmute here. Aaron Cronin. I am a parent of 2 students in elementary at Lewis Elementary School, and just figured I'd like to see how the sausage is made and get involved as best I can.
Thank you. And Deshelle?
Hi, yes, I'm Deshelle. I'm a PPS parent and community leader, and this is my 2nd year on CBRC.
Thanks so much. Paul, are you ready to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Paul Fries. I use he, him pronouns. I have 3 children in PPS, one in middle school, one in middle school, 2 in elementary school. And this is my 2nd year, so I feel like I've got my feet under me a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephen?
Yeah, thank you. This is Stefan Lindner. The pronunciation of my first name is like Stephanie without the E, so Stefan. Pronouns is he, she, him. I'm also parent of 2 children in PPS, one in elementary school, one in middle school. Professionally, I work at OHSU as an economist. This is my 2nd year. I still want to know how the sausage is made, so it might take a while for new members.
All right. Karanja, Mr. Cruz. We can come back to you, Karanja. I think I got to our CBRC members who are on right now. I'll go back to our staff members. Tu, would you like to introduce yourself?
Happy to. My name is Tu, and I use she, they pronouns. I've been supporting the finance and budget team this school year and happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Juno, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name's Juno Chang. I use he, him pronouns. I am the senior budget manager for Portland.
Thanks. And Myung is on the call.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here for this content-rich discussion. My name is Myung Lee. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the interim deputy superintendent for business and operations. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Myung. And Director Sullivan, would you like to introduce yourself? I'm sure we all know you.
I'm Patty Sullivan. I'm a new member of the board, so I guess I'm going to be learning how the sausage is made along with everybody else. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the liaison from the board.
Thanks so much. We have a couple of new members who it looks like are not joining the call yet, and Adrielle, who wasn't able to make it. So we'll look forward to connecting with them in the future. So wanted to kick us off with just a little bit of housekeeping. Should be quick. But just running through a few of the hanging items. So we had a successful member recruitment with 3 members joining us for 3-year terms. They were appointed by the board several weeks ago. And we still needed student members. And so we've extended the application for our students, and we do have some excellent student candidates. So the same selection committee will be conducting interviews with the students. All the students who applied will be invited to interview this coming week. And if all goes according to plan, we would appoint these students at the next available board meeting. So hopefully that would be our January meeting. More to come on that as that work develops. Quickly, I wanted to just alert you that I'm going to be sending out an email so that we can opt in to sharing phone numbers with each other. You can all get in touch directly that way. So that was a request from one of our members, and so I'll go ahead and get in touch with you to see if we can kind of oops, the lights have gone off here. If we can expand some of that, the content that we're sharing about each other to be in touch. The other point I wanted to cover was the process for questions and answers. So I distributed a Google form. You're always welcome to email me as well if you have questions that are content-oriented questions. Or any other question, but I'm specifically talking about, I had a question based on this board presentation, or I had a question based on, that's specific to budget. I can record your questions, and they'll all be populated on the CBRC member portal, which I did also send out to you. So that's available and ready for you. We're already logging some questions and responding to some questions there. So please feel free, use the form or email me, and we'll populate those answers as we can. I also will be sending out a note to solicit topics for Budget 101. You can just respond to me in that email if you have some specific wonderings. We would otherwise just plan for a general Budget 101 overview. And we also have had some conversations on fund balance, reserves, and contingency, and so would cover that content specifically. But if you have other content, conceptual budget content that you would like us to address, let us know so that we can be well prepared, and we can, create slides or visuals to make it accessible and cover those points that you're really interested in. We are planning to have this meeting in person. It would be hybrid, so you'll be able to join on Zoom as well, but we would host in the Profit Center. I'll plan on having food, and so please also let me know if you have food restrictions, so that I can plan for that. Okay, so I think we're ready to move to our next part of the content. I have Myung here to cover some of this content, which is a preliminary view into the impact of the PAT agreement.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Alexandra. So I'm going to do my best to cover some of the many words on this slide, and I'll kind of keep in mind the sort of pacing that was suggested to me by Alexandra, that this should take about 15 minutes for this section of the meeting, but I'm totally open to feedback from anybody about, going faster or slowing down, as the case may be. And I also want to acknowledge that Director Sullivan was in many hours, and day after day, evening after evening of board discussions and really important and sometimes difficult conversations around all of this. So Director Sullivan, if I can also invite you to maybe share the mic with me about anything that you'd like to add or correct, as the case may be, about this topic. So as I said, there's a lot of content here. I don't know if the CBRC would like to go, in great depth, or what depth you'd like to go into about these. But if I can just sort of give a quick voiceover of the, some of these highlights from the agreement, and again, open to feedback about how much, if anybody would like me to pause, for example. So the biggest sort of feature in a lot of ways, at least in terms of the items of the agreement that have an impact on the budget, are the salary table increases, sometimes known as cost of living adjustments. And those are a total of 13.8% over the 3 years. And that breaks down, I'll just kind of say verbally that breaks down into 6.25% in the year that we're in, 23-24, a 4.5% increase for next year, 24-25, which will be the budget year. And that's for the bulk of PAT members who work the 192 or soon to be 193 day calendar. And then a 3% increase in the third year of the contract, which is 25-26. And so in addition to those increases, the members of PAT that are not on the maximum salary step also receive step increases each year that they're eligible, i.e., not maxed out. And that's about 3.4% each year. And over the 3 years, that's an additional 10.6%. Again, for those teachers and other members of PAT that are not yet at the maximum in terms of their years of experience and the steps that they're on. And that's about half, roughly. It's about half of the members of PAT are at the maximum step, and the other half are still advancing, or eligible to advance on their steps. I see a hand from Grace.
Hi, sorry, I'm driving home still from school, so my video is not on. But I just wanted to have you clarify the new contract is offering the 13 point, did you say 0.8%
Yes.
increase over 3 years?
Yes,
Okay. And the step increase, is that part of this new contract, or has that been standard practice?
That's standard, yeah. So the step increases are not new from this agreement. Those are continuing as they were in prior agreements.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And actually, it's 13.75 in terms of the 3 years of those across the board increases to the salary tables. So just to be precise, it's 13.75%. And although there is a little bit of compounding that will occur, so the actual salary tables by the third year will be a little higher than that. So Alexander, could you help me keep track of, I saw a couple of hands, but then they went down. I see Grace's hand up again. I don't know if that's from before.
That was from before.
Okay. Thank you, Grace. Okay, so just to kind of continue down, Stefan.
Yeah, I think I just want to check. Is that, sorry, just to clarify, is that, I thought it was like that increase was 4.5, what I read. Is that just like a accounting difference, or did I get this wrong?
Yes, did I misstate that? Yes, it's 4.5% in the second year. That's what I meant to say. Sorry if I misstated that.
Yes, that went up kind of at the last minute. So you were probably still on the old one. You did say, wait, just 5, I mean 4.
Oh, okay, sorry.
But it is 4.5, yeah.
My mistake. How could I forget that, Director Sullivan?
Yeah, how could you forget?
Yes, okay, that was an important change. Okay, so Stefan, did that answer your question? Okay, thank you. So the next item is this is I don't know if folks are delving into the different article numbers. All of the tentative agreement in its entirety, I believe, has been posted on our website, pps.net. So this is in Article 9. So there was a change to the language to replace mandatory suspensions, which had been in the prior contract for certain disciplinary situations or infractions on the part of students in terms of behavior issues, to replace those with trauma-informed processes to support students, both in the immediate event of the incident, such as it may be, and to support their reentry. There were a few new class size thresholds and processes for resolving class size concerns. This was a hot topic during these negotiations and during the strike. And there were some compromises between PPS and PAT. And there were a few new categories of class size thresholds and payments related to those thresholds, and certain additional new processes for some problem solving discussions and problem solving around cases in which the thresholds were exceeded, where there are too many students compared to the threshold for the respective grade or type of classroom.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about the class size committees and making sure they were discussing class size more in general and not particular students. So that was something that was really important to the board. And they took a while to work out, but we did.
Agreed. Thanks, Director Sullivan. So the next one is to provide all middle school students with a 7-period day, or the terminology I've heard here is 5 of 7. So taking 5 classes in a given day, with the student having a course load of 7 different classes. And that's to expand electives and to also provide some additional reductions in class size and some additional planning time. Then the next one is committing $20 million in capital funds. This is from the city of Portland. That was a grant or funds that were earmarked, I should say, for environmental sustainability related investments. And $20 million has been identified and earmarked for PPS. Applications still have to be submitted, and the funds have to be released, of course. But in these negotiations, there was an agreement to really focus those dollars, those resources on environmental conditions within our schools and our classrooms, especially with the focus on temperature and other maintenance issues. So that's not entirely new money. It's not from it's not originating from the district, but the city did, multiple leaders in the city did commit to helping fast track those dollars to get them in the door sooner and basically to be utilized more quickly for our students and our staff. The next one is maintaining student instruction time and adding 15 minutes to the school day for elementary and middle school students and middle school grades beginning next school year. This is sort of linked to the next point, which is to increase minimum planning time by 90 minutes every week from current allotment of 320 minutes that are in the contract to 410 minutes for elementary and middle school educators, while also adding planning and grading days for all levels. One thing that's not stated on the bullet point, but I'll mention, is that for teachers and educators who work 192 days this year, or who have been working 192 days, a service calendar of 192 days, that will increase by 1 day, 193 days, starting next school year. So for the second and third year of this agreement, and that was closely linked to the additional 0.5% that we were talking about a few minutes ago in the second year of the agreement, that going from 4 to 4.5% on the salary table. The second to last point is about investments in the district's rapid response team, focusing on student mental and behavioral health needs. So that's increasing a team that is currently 4 folks to 12 folks. So increasing the scope and the reach of those colleagues to assist other colleagues and students. And then finally, expediting our hiring processes so we can be more competitive earlier in the spring to have the best, most conducive timeline to get a wider range of candidates in the process. Roger.
Yes, expediting hiring. Historically, we've been very lax and have come into the market late. And then we successfully moved that up to as early as February, and then it went back down to as late as June and so on. How is the district going to address that?
Right. So, sorry, Director Sullivan, would you like to address that? You're on mute, by the way.
My phone rang, so I muted, and then mute when I talk. Yeah, what they were doing before was when people would say they were going to leave, say, I think they had to tell them in January, then people who wanted to change to a different school could. And then that left openings in those schools. So that was a second round. So what we got rid of was the second round. So it makes us, I think, 2 or 3 weeks earlier in hiring than we were. And Roger, I'm not exactly sure how early or exactly what month it is, but it should give us a lot better advantage. And that was a hard fought one, but we managed to get it.
if I was tracking correctly, I think one of the strategies, sort of an alternative idea, is to have a sort of a, I think they were calling it a job fair, to sort of, you know, have a compressed event where colleagues who are interested in looking at different assignments or different locations could you know, talk with site leaders at, you know, a variety of locations all together. So kind of, you know, having a one sort of timely event where, you know, multiple people could talk to different school leaders, and sort of thereby compressing the amount of time that internal round takes.
Yeah, I think that was compressed to 2 days. And
yeah,
so it should really help.
Right. Okay. And then so those are the highlights. I mean, not every single, it wasn't possible to, you know, name every single change in every single article of the agreement, but these are we think the most significant ones. And we'll definitely, you know, if there are questions, whether now or as Alexandra said, if folks want to put questions in the document, we can follow up with more details after the meeting. And there are many details. I see Roger's hand and Grace's hand.
Okay, well, Grace, you want to go first?
Sure, thanks, Roger. So in the agreement, I heard you say that there was an increase this year of 8 FTE for mental health. Is that correct?
I think it's meant to begin next year.
Next year, okay. And other than that increase, were there any other dollars committed to direct service support to students in this contract?
Well, so part of the increase in the let me see which item this is. I think it's connected to the 4th point about the 7-period day to expand electives and drive down class sizes. Part of the form that will take is additional sort of specials, arts and music, and or other sort of electives, I guess, to allow more planning time. So this is kind of in a way a win-win. It's an investment in more staff for those types of sections, but it also allows more planning time for other educators in other subjects.
And I know they were really wanting to do this before and felt we couldn't afford it. And so in a way, this pushed us. Maybe we still can't afford it, but at least it's now in the contract. And this should really give, especially in the middle schools that were only had the 6-period day, this really will make a change for them. So, and for their teachers. So it's going to be expensive because obviously you have to hire more staff, but it should be a win-win for everybody.
And I'm also noticing kind of this is something I'm spotting as we're having this conversation, that also applies to elementary schools, and I think we could probably tweak that, maybe the 3rd bullet from the bottom, to make that clearer, that there are, you know, specials, investments in specials teachers. So, you know, whether it's arts, PE, librarians, to also allow more planning time and to have you know, more robust programming at the elementary level, like we were just talking about with middle schools.
Mine was more of a comment than a question. Obviously, CBRC awaits a more thorough briefing as to what the costs are of the collective bargaining agreements, the one that has been concluded with PAT and those that are still pending. And regrettably, we're having to await that more thorough briefing until our next meeting at the earliest. And there are lots of questions as to how things will be paid for. And I would encourage committee members, if you haven't already done so, to go back and look on the website to the recording of the board's meeting just this week, where they approved the collective bargaining agreement with PAT, and particularly listen to each board director's comments, and bear those in mind as we raise our own questions.
Yes, particularly Director Scott does a
Yeah.
really good job explaining the budget.
And I, just as a hot tip, please also listen to Director Sullivan's comments at that part of the meeting. Beautifully put, if I may.
Thank you.
Okay, so Alexandra, could we go on to the next slide? This is all sort of connected to the same agenda item, impact of the PAT agreement. So
I'm sorry. Did you talk about can you go back to the next slide again? Did you talk about the triples, the district rapid response team? I had stepped away for a minute. I'm at work multitasking. So I was just curious if you had touched on that.
briefly, Karanja, I had just said that the team right now is a team of 4. And that team is going to be expanding by 8 to be a team of 12.
Is that per school?
No, it's for the district. This is district wide. Different folks in different disciplines to support schools who have sort of emergent needs presenting regarding particular students, to support particular students that are experiencing whether dysregulation of some sort or what have you, to help the staff at the school with tier 2, tier 3 behavioral strategies. So it is a fairly modest sized team now, and it's to triple that to a team of 12, and that's what's in this agreement. I will say that I've heard the superintendent talk on several occasions about how this is something that the district, in his view and under his leadership, should continue to look at in more general terms, and learn from and continue to consider scaling up. But in the specific fine print of this agreement, that's the increase.
All right, thank you. And what article was that?
I believe that's Article 9.
And that doesn't mean that individual schools don't have their own teams too, but this is when escalation is really bad. And not if it was the perfect world, everybody would have a team like that. And of course the union would love that, and the teachers would love that, but it's extremely expensive. So adding what they have now, adding what we did add should be helpful and should help us to learn. It's a really difficult part of teaching if you have children in your classroom that are out of control. And this is what we're really working on, trying to find the best that we can do with the money we have. And we appreciated what the teachers want. It's just hard to get everything.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So the next slide talks about the sort of fiscal picture or fiscal outlook, and I think, as Roger mentioned, as I think Alexandra said something along these lines too at the top of the meeting. This is preliminary. We know we need to do a lot more analysis, and in some ways this sort of sets the stage for the budget development cycle. And throughout that whole process, we want to be in good contact, sharing information and engaging the CBRC in your views and your questions about all of this. So consider this sort of a meager but meaningful, hopefully meaningful down payment of information tonight, and setting the stage for a lot more to come. Let me pause. I see a couple of hands up, and then I can kind of talk about what's on the slide. Roger and Grace.
Grace, go ahead. Grace.
I think her hand was up from earlier.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. I'll ask. Would you just briefly explain what's the difference between the green and the black?
Sure. Yes, I can speak to that. So what these numbers in that top row mean, the gap targets, we've spent the last few months, let's say 2 or 3 months, kind of updating and refreshing the district's general budget projections since the budget was adopted by the board in June, right? So there's been, more work done this fall to look at all of the revenue assumptions, look at all the expenditure assumptions, even separate and apart from these negotiations, and to forecast what the trajectory is of the bottom line, the ending fund balance each year, and then layering on top of those updated forecasts are the final results of this settlement of these negotiations. So when we put all of that together, we have identified, and again, consider this a preview of coming attractions, but we have identified that there will need to be gap closing strategies, either expenditure reductions or additional revenues, to the tune of the numbers that are in the top row. So $10 million in the current year, $41 million in the second year, or the budget year. We'll be calling it the budget year soon enough, and $79 million in the following year, the third year of the agreement. So that is over those 3 years, that's a total of $130 million. Again, these numbers will shift. These numbers will, they're dynamic. They're not, frozen in time. But these are our projections at this moment in time. So the numbers in green, basically, let me kind of walk through this step by step. Our aim is to identify $10 million of most likely, expenditure reductions, or ways to slow down spending so that we spend $10 million less than we would otherwise be on track to spend this year, right? 23, 24, in the 7 months that remain. And then in 24, 25, to address a $41 million target, if hypothetically, if the reductions that we identify this year, the 10 million, carry through to next year, then the task would be to identify another $31 million of reductions for a total of $41 million, or strategies, I should say, because we also want to be looking at opportunities to identify new revenues, right? But in the short term, just to be honest, I think most of the strategies are going to be taking the form of expenditure reductions. And then into 25-26, again, if we have a total target of 79 million, but we have ongoing strategies that can be continued from the prior 2 years of 10 million plus 31 million, then we would need to identify a new additional $38 million. So that's sort of trying to break down the distinct in sort of a step-by-step or stepwise manner. And there are a lot of questions about whether the reductions that we identify in any given year, whether they might be one time versus ongoing, things like that. So there are a lot of details to figure out here for sure. But just to sort of illustrate that it's not necessarily, $41 million of brand new reductions next year, and then another $79 million of new reductions the following year, that there is a relationship between strategies that are identified in 1 year that could carry over and be ongoing in the subsequent years. Does that help, Roger?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just kind of keep going onto the second row and sort of explain what this might look like. Again, very, very broad, very high level, just a place to start. In terms of possible impacts, so some of the things that we're thinking about for this year are re-strategizing around special revenues. So it's kind of reconsidering whether if there are ways or options to utilize our special revenues to help the general fund, right? To take on expenditures that are qualified, that are eligible to be spent using special revenue funds, to think about what those might look like, to slow down spending that's already planned and budgeted, so that we could underspend and therefore, sort of sweep those budgets or those savings, and slow down hiring or pause hiring or freeze hiring, and therefore save less money on, or spend less money on personnel. The emphasis there being not personnel at school sites by and large. And then in the 24-25 column, again, ongoing reductions from prior years, if they are ongoing, can help meet the target for 24-25. And budget development for 24-25 really will begin in earnest in January. And as I think everybody on the CBRC knows, the CBRC plays a really important role in having public discussions about the priorities and the process for budget development. That will be doubly true this year, and the board will also have several public meetings focused on the budget. So our work as staff now, December starts tomorrow. So over the next several weeks is to really get organized, to get our analysis together, to get our processes designed or drafted, and to discuss that with the superintendent and the senior staff and also with the board, so that when the new year comes, we can be. It's going to be a tough budget cycle because of the gaps that we're talking about, but we want to be well organized and have good information put together, curated, if you will, so that we can have as successful a budget development process as possible, understanding that it's going to be a tough year. Some years are more, are brighter because there's more growth in revenues, or there's more flexibility to invest additional money. This is not shaping up to be one of those years. So we want to get our ducks in a row as much as possible, so that we can get off to a good start in January. And then the last point that I wanted to make about 25-26, which maybe is sort of the hopeful part of this. I know it's not. This is a little bit gloomy, but the last point about additional state school fund revenue. 25-26, as I think many of you know, is the first year of the next biennium. And so sort of a fresh opportunity for the legislature to sort their views on the budget priorities in the state, and rescore revenues, assumptions, and everything, and decide how to allocate across multiple competing investments. In this context, superintendent says all the time, PPS is the first of many, right? We're sort of we're kind of on the edge, the leading edge of a process and challenges that are going to be confronted by most of the other districts in the state, and that's already happening in a number of jurisdictions. And so in that context, there is a opportunity, I would say, it seems, to bring, and I know CBRC has emphasized this in your recommendations before, like highlighting the importance of advocacy and speaking up for the QEM, or to move closer to the quality education model. Basically changing the paradigm of what would be considered acceptable and appropriate in terms of state funding, which is the largest source of, that's the largest driver of the budget for PPS and other districts. So to the extent our revenue projections that are embedded in these gap estimates end up being lower than what actually can happen, or what actually does happen, because there's more recognition that education is underfunded, because there's more voices and more advocacy speaking up for that point of view, and actions and decisions by the legislature reflecting that. And Director Sullivan mentioned Director Scott the other day, really kind of articulated that quite well, as other directors did too. But that's a key hope and a key strategy, and I think members of the CBRC can be helpful allies in that. Director Sullivan, can I ask you if you want to comment on this? You're muted still.
Yeah, one thing about the strike was that it sort of made the QEM become a household word, where most people hadn't even heard about it before. So I'm hoping people really do talk to their legislators. I was very upset when the legislators came out with a letter pretty much saying, we support the union, and then listed all the things they wanted with not even a pause to say, gee, maybe we can't afford it. So I think they definitely heard us, but I think they have to keep hearing. So you and everybody has to really put pressure on them, I think. I know.
Absolutely.
Just to briefly give a little history, ballot measure 5 was enacted over 20 years ago. I think it's almost 30 now, and we experienced at least 2 decades of cutting. Primarily, the first to go were arts programs and so on. The QEM was adopted by the legislature, I believe, in 2006. There has not ever been a governor nor a legislature that has appropriated at the QAM level. This go around, the governor initially proposed a $9.7 billion budget. Late in the session, long after districts were having to adopt a budget and submit it by the 30th of June, the legislature finally increased the appropriation to 10.2 billion. That's still 100 million less than what school districts lobbied for at 10.3, because to continue maintenance of effort. So that's why we're immediately thrust into having to adopt an amended budget. Typically, districts amend their budget after enrollments are certified in October. That's because usually enrollments at first in September seem larger than they ultimately pan out to be in October. And then that is the amount, or that enrollment number is what the state uses to reimburse the district for its expenses in the going year, fiscal year. As you know, the budget is biennial, in other words, it covers a 2-year period in the legislature. Typically, districts use 49% the first year and 51% the second year to help account for the cost of living increases that are experienced. We definitely need to go to Salem and lobby very strongly that the governor propose a budget at the QAM level and that the legislature enact in the QAM level. And I would encourage people to ask candidates when they're running for office whether they support the QAM. End of statement.
Hold on. Hey, so I just got a clarification question. So I know you probably already mentioned this, but I just want to clarify. So the 31, so that plus 31 million that's in green, so that's the deficit, that's what we need to make up?
So it's actually the 41. It's the numbers in black that are at the top. It's just that if there are $10 million that are identified this year that continue, then we'd need to find another 31.
Got you. Okay, so we need to find, okay, the deficits is in black, and then the money in green is what we need to find.
Right. It's kind of the additional new strategies each year, assuming that the strategies that were identified the prior year continue.
Okay. And then when you say cuts, the ongoing reductions from prior years, the central office hiring and spending restrictions, what is that?
Right. So let me try to use an example. If there was a position, let's say there's a position that's not filled right now, and that's in the budget, but it's not being performed by a person, a human, and so the hiring restriction would be we're not going to hire that person, right? We're going to just hold off on hiring that person, and therefore saving money compared to what's in the budget. So imagine that being part of the 10 million for 23-24. Let's say in 24-25, we continue not to hire to fill that position. So that, compared to the forecast that assume that position is filled, we actually don't fill that position. Therefore, we're saving money this year, but we're also saving money next year and perhaps the third year. So that's just one sort of, one specific illustration of that, of the concept there. Of course, we'd need a lot of those, a lot of those things to add up to the 10 million or the 31 million. A lot of those types of moves, I should say. I saw Stefan.
What's frightening too is that most of our spending is on student-facing staff. So that's who we do not want to cut. But unfortunately, that's where most of the cuts might have to be made, which is why we really have to get some more money and maybe look at the kicker too. I don't know if there's any way to get rid of that thing, but that would be wonderful.
Agreed. Stefan?
Yeah, thank you for presenting that. I want to just 2 comments. One thing is, when I read this, it looks to me versus in the possible impacts, there's a little bit of a mix between strategies or potential ways to do this, and then what I might call opportunities or changes outside of organization. One thing what PBS could do, if you haven't already done, is do something that's similar to SWOT, like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threat analysis, to see what some of those systemize a little bit, what some of those changes are in this new landscape. And then related to threats, I want to highlight one thing, but what I haven't heard yet or seen yet is enrollment declines. And we had enrollment declines due to a pandemic. That's something I actually emphasized in the last report, that the district should take a proactive role on enrollment. I know there's been some efforts there. I think those are probably not going to follow through with those new budgets. But one thing to worry about is that the strike has implications about enrollments, negative implications about enrollments. So that, plainly speaking, some families who currently have their students in PPS will not re-enroll them, or students or those who would enroll their children in kindergarten will not do that in the next year. And one way you can look for that is you can look at early indicators. So if you have, for instance, sessions that like informative sessions about kindergarten, and you see lower numbers there. I don't know if you track that, but that could be an early indicator to see what that looks like, or if you have enrollment, how you track enrollment for the budget year. I think that's something perhaps to monitor, just to see how those numbers develop.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Maybe one point of information is that our forecasts, when I was talking about the effort or the work to update our revenue assumptions, our expenditure assumptions over the last few months, we have updated the revenue assumptions based on our most recent projections of enrollment changes, or to a degree, enrollment declines year by year. So that's already been baked in. Now, what you just mentioned, Stefan, about like maybe additional of effects on families' decisions, related to the strike, we have not begun estimating that effect. I will say, on one sort of bright spot, silver lining note, when we were talking about some of the additional investments, for example, more specials, elementary and middle school level. I mean, there are some aspects of this agreement, as tough as it's been to reach, that may be appealing. That the programs that result may help the student experience. So, I don't want to be sort of Pollyanna-ish about it, but there are, I think there are going to be a number of different effects on the part of families' choices. But I think we have a fair amount of work to do to analyze that. Grace, sorry, was that?
Well, Grace, if you want to talk about, I could just say one or two more things to this topic, but I don't want to keep us too much from other things. But I agree with that, and I think that I just want to say that your predictions are based on the information I think before the strike, and I agree that there might be also positive aspects that come out of it. I just wanna sort of encourage you to monitor that because I think it's your main variable in terms of revenue currently without new state funding coming in. Your main variable determining revenue is enrollment, right? So any changes to enrollment are going to have repercussions on your budget. So I think it's like it's essentially your central budgetary performance metrics to monitor.
Yeah, very well taken. Very much agree. Grace, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. And I might be jumping ahead to more thorough deep dive. So if this needs to be paused to a future conversation, I'm fine with that. But I'm trying to wrap my head around that hefty amount, 10 million, and I'm trying to figure out a couple of things. I heard you say that there are 8 FTE added with the contract and of course the percentage for the COLA, but that still seems like a really large number to me. Maybe I'm just not mathing through it correctly. So I want to clarify that what you're showing us is only the fiscal impact of what you're ballparking, the fiscal impact of the PAT agreement, not any other changes, correct?
Right. It's the effect of the PAT agreement interacting with all of our updates to our revenue and expenditure assumptions. So this is not meant to represent just the costs of the PAT agreement. It's just kind of like, and this doesn't show you all of the other math for sure. But it's basically saying if we take our current revenue assumptions, expenditure assumptions, including the cost elements of the PAT agreement, then this is these are the strategies that the magnitude of the strategies that we have to identify each year in order to maintain that minimum 5% fund balance each year, especially in years 2 and 3.
Okay, so the title of the slide is a little bit misleading. It's not the fiscal impact just of the agreement, but of the other adjustments.
That's fair. I think that's a good. Yeah, okay. That's fair. Yeah.
And then this again can be paused for future because I know we're going to talk about contingency and reserves and everything. But I have the last year's budget book, and proposed was in the ballpark of 43 million in contingency. Is that at all being looked at to cover some of that 10 million for this year?
Well, the 43 million in contingency is basically the amount that translates to 5% of the district's budget, and that's sort of the minimum amount that by board policy that the district's general fund should be at in terms of fund balance. So if we all of our analysis and the board's target setting is based on being at or above that level, so not dipping below that 5%, and that's underlying.
And then for the 22-23 budget, we don't yet have an idea of how much.
Grace, I'm sorry, Grace. You have explored this subject numerous times. We have arranged for a briefing on that at your next meeting, and please wait for that. We have already expended 50 million out of the adopted budget, out of the contingency reserves. So it was at 90 million. we're now at 40. So let's wait until we get a briefing on it.
Thank you, Roger. I
Please.
have one short question to ask, and it can be paused until the next briefing. But I'd like to get it on record that I asked the question. Is that okay with you?
Go ahead.
We don't yet know the actual contingency amount, if there was anything left, correct, from the 22-23 budget?
So at the end of the 22-23 budget, the fund balance, ending fund balance, which becomes the beginning fund balance for 23-24, was 105 million. So that came in about $10 million higher than the amount that was assumed in the adopted budget for 23-24. So the book that I think you're looking at, Grace, that shows the 43 million ending balance, I think assumed a beginning balance of 95 million for this year. So when all the calculation, all the tabulations came in, all the the official auditing, closing of the books for last year was completed, that 95 million came in at about 105 million.
Okay. I'll ask more questions at the next briefing because I'm seeing a 0 on the budgeted ending balance for 22-23. There was nothing budgeted, but there was 50 million budgeted in contingency. So I'm still unclear about those dollars.
Yeah, I agree with Roger and your question that this is a little confusing. It's a good topic it's an important topic to clarify, and I'm glad that'll be taken up next time. This whole relationship between contingency and ending fund balance, and I've learned a lot about this topic over the last few weeks too. And Juno he's an expert in this. He can help address that next time.
Yeah, I was going to say, over the years, it's been problematic because fund balance, contingency, and reserves have been intermixed, and there's not been one universal term. So,
agreed. Okay, so I'm looking at the clock, and I know we're quite a bit over. So if it's okay to sort of keep going and try to get to the next section of the agenda.
I think that's
go ahead, Alexander.
No, I think that's a good idea, and I was going to transition us to that, which was the budget amendment update. But
okay.
Did you have another comment?
No, happy to go there. Okay, so just to share that the board is going to be receiving a recommended amendment through the superintendent at their first meeting in January 9th, and we'll receive a preview of that amendment at the upcoming board meeting on December 12th. So wanted to highlight a couple things. So since the CBRC last engaged on the amendment, that was, there was a plan to present an amendment earlier, a couple months ago, that was then postponed. But at that time, there were a certain set of assumptions and everything. And so we just wanted to highlight a couple of changes. When you see the amendment, which you will next week, we wanted, just want to, while we're here, just highlight a couple of things. One is that the revenue increases still reflect the additional dollars in the state school fund and integrated grant funds, which we had queued up or teed up in when the amendment was going to go before. We've aligned the beginning fund balance to unaudited actuals. That's what I was just commenting on a minute ago about the $105 million beginning fund balance. And now, very importantly, the planned expenditures now reflect the PAT agreement. So when you see the budget amendment, the preview of which will be shared at the December 12th meeting for discussion, not for action, those features, those elements will be featured. And we will share more details with CBRC next week, the week of December 4th, on board book. So look for an email from Alexandra sort of calling your attention to those materials being posted, and then again discussed on December 12th, and then put before the board for a vote in January. Alexandra, I think that's it for that
Yeah,
section.
that did include that content. And we are a little over time. Were there any quick clarifying questions on the amendment, or should we move on to the other topics? It's like we're okay.
Well, answer when CBRC has been asked to comment and analyze and comment on the amendment, when would that be expected?
So we haven't explicitly talked about this, to be frank, but let me just sort of offer an observation or two. Maybe it sort of depends on the CBRC's perspective in terms of timing too. So we would share this preview in a little less than 2 weeks on December 12th. And then there's the vote or the action would be on January 9th. And in between there are holidays and things, right? So I think, Alexandra, Juno, correct me if you disagree, but I think we would be open, we welcome your feedback at any point in between those two events. So I think it's sort of up to the CBRC about like, and I know you have a meeting, right, on December 14th, I think it is. So it may present an opportunity for some discussion. Alexandra, I'm going to stop talking and turn it to you.
Directors, that all made sense to me, and maybe we can put it. It's unusual for CBRC, as far as my experience over the last couple of years working with the committee, that we've engaged on the budget amendments, and so we can put it out there to the committee as well. I think our team made the recommendation that we create a staff report based on the insights that we heard in the meeting. There are probably great alternatives to that, and so we can be responsive to what form you think that should take. I see Director Sullivan, you have your hand up, and so does Roger. Do you want to jump in?
Okay, I was just going to say, no, we had a schedule of starting to talk about the budget on the board, and then that's all been thrown into chaos as far as having time to do that. So I guess maybe the amendment to the board will go January 9th, but I don't think we're quite ready for it yet. So we may have to kind of wait and see, but I think we're always open to any comments or ideas that you have. So things seem to be thrown a little bit off right now, but they will get back on schedule, I'm sure.
Well, I guess I would ask Director Sullivan whether you thought it would be appropriate that we craft an analysis and statement and present it at that board meeting on the 9th of January or whatever subsequent date that might be selected for action.
Well, certainly from my point of view, it is. Would probably need to talk to Chairman Holland to make sure and get it on the agenda, but certainly sounds like a good idea to me, but I can talk to him about that.
Yeah, as Alexander acknowledged, CBRC has not played a role in commenting on budget amendments previously because Beyond's predecessor vehemently opposed it. And so now that we have the board asking us to comment and analyze budget amendments, we're just trying to follow whatever procedure you want to set. But
Okay, I'll talk to Chairman Holland about it and get back to you. And this is your comments on the budget amendment, right?
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. I think those sound like good next steps. Thank you, Director Sullivan. So the next portions of our meeting are focused on discussion on the purpose of CBRC and anchoring into our foundational documents. We have 2 documents that we anchor into for CBRC. I linked them in the slide deck that I emailed to you all. So we have both a charter. Our charter is adopted by the board, and we have a CBRC operating guide. There is some duplicate content across both of these, but our operating guide does provide more, a little bit more detail in how we operate in terms of how we conduct recruitments and what is the purview or is not the purview of the CBRC. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to walk through the charter initially, and then tee up potentially some action around the operating guide. This is something that we had kind of left hanging last year and didn't ultimately, as a committee, approve some revisions that were requested. So initially just going to go into the CBRC charter. So some of you know this, but I think it bears repeating, and we can see how this resonates now. The mission of the CBRC is to review, evaluate, and make recommendations to the board regarding the proposed budget and other budgetary issues identified. And the CBRC serves as an advisory group to the elected members of the board. The CBRC is composed of 8 to 12 volunteer members. This is naming the 3-year members. The members are selected and appointed by the board to 3-year terms and may serve up to 3 terms. This says a student member is generally appointed to a 1-year term. I will point out that last year we had 2 student members, and so the grammar of this doesn't really align with something new that we did last year where we had multiple student members appointed to 1-year terms. So what is the CBRC focused on doing while they're focusing on budget development? They're doing a budget review and making recommendations and observations based on that budget. So our members are selected and appointed by the board. During our work at the CBRC, we're incorporating the racial equity social justice framework. And we also are supported by a board director. This year, we're lucky to have Director Sullivan participating in our meeting and supporting the committee. Sorry, I misstated this last bullet point. This is about our chairperson. So this is describing our CBRC leadership, and we have had different structures here for leadership. We've had co-chairs, vice chairs, and it describes the role of that leadership member. So the CBRC is charged with reviewing the proposed budget and providing feedback to the board. We know that this typically takes shape in a report that's provided and presented to the board. The other charge of the CBRC is monitoring and advising the board on the expenditure and allocation of local option levy funds. And then our charter also states that if special project is chosen, the board will direct the CBRC to discuss the charge in more detail. And so we have seen that special projects are taken on by the CBRC. This goes on to state that the board recognizes the district employees and community members bring specialized knowledge and expertise to the budgetary review process. And the board instructs the CBRC members to employ discretion, avoid conflicts of interest, and avoid the appearance of conflicts of interest, and exercise care in performing duties and making recommendations. And this also goes on to state that our CBRC members are participants and appointed members of a public advisory body and should follow the ethics rules contained in this in ORS section 244, which is on government ethics, and I've linked that, so that's available to you in our slide deck. So that was just the high level overview of what our charter contains. I am going to pause to see if there was any reaction to that. I think it should be familiar to all of you having gone through the recruitment process as well as being members. And this again was from our charter, which is adopted by the board. Are there any questions or comments on that content? Grace?
I was just wondering if all the members have access to the REST-J framework to review?
That's a great question, and that's something I can locate and send out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stefan?
Yeah, two questions. One thing is, I think we may have discussed there's like a minimum number of people to attend for quorum. I don't know if that was something we wanted to include in there or not. The other thing is, I didn't see anything in the charter about some sort of meeting rules and what the chair's role is in there.
Thank you for those observations and questions. I believe, so the quorum is mentioned in our operating guide, which provides, like I was mentioning, a little bit more detail on how the CBRC operates. And so I know you had flagged for us last year that quorum is mentioned in our operating guide, but it is not defined. And we would follow public meeting operating policies generally, which was 50% plus 1 for a quorum. And so we can define that as we move forward in our operating guide.
Yeah, Grace, so I just saw that, sorry.
Grace, did you have another comment or question on charter?
No, I just didn't click lower hand, sorry.
Okay. So the piece I wanted to focus a little bit more on was the operating guide. And in my email to you all, I sent out a link to the Google Doc version of this where you can see the legacy comments from last year that we had not resolved. And so one of them I noted was, Stefan, your comment on quorum. There were other comments from Mariah on when we're returning to virtual meetings. And I know we did discuss this in our meeting series last year, but we didn't ultimately approve changes and put this before the committee to vote on. So there are, probably multiple ways that we could go about doing this, but I'm going to suggest that we designate some members and potentially our CBRC leadership and with staff support, and I would support that, to resolve the comments that we have and make edits to create a new version of this, and then we can bring it to another meeting, and then we would vote, or CBRC members would vote to approve a new version of the operating guide. We can solicit feedback from you all. So if you think there are further revisions that are required, or you're suggesting further revisions to the operating guide, we can take those in and process through them and then create a document for you to react to. So that's my suggestion. And when we vote on this, we had decided last year that our board liaison would oversee that process. And so we would need to make sure that we have attendance from Director Sullivan to vote on that. Does that any reactions to my suggestion that we create a new version for you all to approve or continue to revise as you see fit?
I think we need to proceed with revising it and updating it, and I think your proposal is a sound one.
Okay, I'm hearing that sounds okay for Roger, and not seeing a lot of other activity with hands or questions. So I'll go ahead and move forward with that, Roger, and others on CBRC leadership. I'll go ahead and tee up this work with us, and then we'll come back to you all for a reaction on that. And that closes us out on these foundational documents. The next component of our meeting is a discussion on CBRC leadership. So we have typically had a vote for new leaders to kick off our budget development cycle. CBRC leaders for the past year included Mariah, Roger, and Taz. We had 2 co-chairs and a vice chair in our leadership structure. I wanted to open it up for discussion to start to define what these roles looked like. We've had different composition in terms of those roles. So potentially there could be 2 co-chairs with no vice chair. There could just be a chair. So we've had different iterations of those. But I think it would be important for our other committee members to hear what that experience was like. What were some of the activities that you took on as part of your leadership role? We can start to discuss how this can take shape. In prior years, we haven't used one of these initial meetings to vote. We've taken more time to get to know each other. But if people would like to nominate and vote on any leadership, we can do that when the committee is ready to do that. So I'd like to pass it over to you, Roger. Would you like to share what it looks like to be on CBRC leadership with the group?
I guess I'm on. Okay. Well, over the years, it's varied. I mean, one year we had 2 chairs, 2 vice chairs, and 2 student chairs, and 2. I think maybe that was it. It was just we called the students vice chairs. But it has varied from one year to the next. When I first came on the committee, there was a chairman that served for multiple terms, and so it's varied over the years. And kind of along Stefan's question, I would point out that in general, CBRC tries to conduct its agenda observing the Robert's Rules of Order, as is the board's policy. But as you know, that's kind of loosey-goosey at times. But anyway, in general, that's the practice that is followed. And I have served the last 2 years here as chair, and Mariah was my co-chair this year, and was very helpful when I was ill and with COVID, and so I had to have her chair one of our meetings and so on. I do place personally a high regard on attendance. I feel that very much this is a commitment that you have made to serve on the committee, and I would encourage you to attend and not just expect to sign a report at the end of the year.
Thank you. So from my perspective, it looked like some of the work that the leadership team members on the CBRC did was around facilitating our meetings and as well as participating with staff and creating agendas. They've supported recruitments and also play a really large role in creating the CBRC report on the proposed budget. So those are some of the duties to give you a sense of what that looks like. Aaron, did you have your hand up before?
I did, but you kind of answered the question. I just like if they're fluctuating so much, it seems like these appear to be like ceremonial titles. I mean, is there an actual chair that actually does something, or like does a vice chair have a role?
I think we've thought about the vice chair as being a supportive role, but you're right that maybe or Roger, do you want to weigh in on how the hierarchy has functioned?
Well, I guess in truth, it's varied as to who has been chair. It's been my philosophy in chairing the meeting is to keep it punctual, keeping it adhering to the agenda, and more or less sitting back and letting others speak as they want, and to not try to influence the end consensus more than being a participant. And so I guess that's ceremonial in a way, but it's
no, that's functional.
It's functional and gets us through the business at hand.
Stefan, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to direct us to the operating guide. If you search for chair, you can find there's on page 2 is like 2 paragraphs, very short, but there's a little bit of there. The second one I think we already covered in the slides, which is with the assistant of committee review, backup material, current proposed district matters, and prepare and a budget recommendation. So I think there's some leading role in doing these kind of tasks. And then the one before essentially says that the chairperson chairs the meeting. So I think we have a function here in terms of how to do the meeting. How it's been done is then up to the chairperson without further roles. But I think those are the two main functions I see here as a chair. If you want to include other things or be more prescriptive or more detailed about that, then I think we should include that in the operating guide.
Thank you. I took that note. I think Director Sullivan, did you have your hand up next?
Oh, yes, I had it up and put it down. I know I was able to hear your presentation last year when you talked about the budget. And it was really complete and amazing to me that you had put in that much time and effort and thought. And who ends up writing all that up? I mean, is that a joint project or is it assigned?
It's been historically we've tried to reach a consensus in presenting our report to the board, and last year we kind of augmented that consensus report by some sharing of ideas from individual members, but basically it's been a consensus report. And in my own comments to the board last year, I said getting a consensus among 13. Just imagine how easy it must be to get 7.
Comparatively.
My sarcasm comes through.
So are there any other comments on this? So I'm not suggesting that we're voting tonight or nominating tonight. This was more to seed the idea that we're going to take an action on this. Grace, go ahead.
This is more of a question than a comment. In other leadership capacities, usually the vice chair is someone who would have an overlapping, like once the chairs are gone, then the vice chair steps up. Is the timing of that something? I'm wondering if the timing, the staggering of that is something, so they could kind of be in training heading towards being a chair. And I'm not sure of the timing for Mariah, Roger, and Taz at this point. Like, hopefully we don't lose all our leaders in one fell swoop. So.
Well, I would observe that both Mariah and Taz continue in their term longer than do I. I conclude in next June, and I have no intention of re-upping. I have been on by that time 15 years on this committee, and so you're right. Some organizations move up the vice chair to the chair position. When I was an officer in the Oregon PTA, that was a similar practice in that organization. That has not ever been the case in CBRC, is my recollection.
And the only person that we would have concluding their term at the end of this year is Roger. So all of our other members have additional years. Okay, so are there any thoughts or ideas on when you all would like to vote? So we'll have a meeting December 14th, and then I'll send out a proposed schedule for the rest of our CBRC meetings as well. So, but we can plan on the next one being in January. So do we have a sense of when you all would like to plan that? 1 meeting or 2 meetings from now? Aaron?
Yeah, I feel like I would like to get to know people like a left time. Is there a little campaign session that happens?
We haven't had a campaign session. It normally has looked like nominating and then reacting to the nomination and voting. So Roger, correct me if I'm wrong. That's what it's looked like in the last 2 years from my perspective. Have you seen it take shape differently?
Yeah, I don't, Aaron, I don't ever recall anybody campaigning to be chair, personally, I would be prepared to move up Mariah and Taz and add Grace as a third member and move ahead and let's put the boat in the water and get about doing our work.
Oh yeah. My thought was just to at least hear what people's positions would be, what they saw that with the role.
And I'm a strong proponent of meeting in person rather than virtual. We've been wedded to this virtual stuff since COVID, our next meeting is a hybrid meeting, and I would encourage as many people as possible to show up in person. It's a little frustrating to render our report come in the spring and to have a committee member come up and say, "Oh, it's finally nice to really meet you." So, yeah, so.
All right. So I can plan on bringing this up again at the next meeting. We don't have Mariah here, and we've mentioned, Roger, you proposed a structure just now. So if it's possible to have back channel conversations without reaching a quorum on this. And so if you have nominations you want to test or have conversations with your fellow members, that is not.
Give us the phone numbers.
I'll go ahead and bring this up at our next meeting, and potentially if we're ready for that, we can present information to each other and react to it and have a vote. So that actually concludes the content. So we're in our Q&A, go to the order. If there was anything hanging out there or that you would need to mention for the good of the order, and then I'll turn it over to Roger to close us out and adjourn the meeting. Okay.
Well, I guess in Q&A, just to refresh, committee members have asked for a more complete and thorough briefing and on the fiscal impacts of the collective bargaining agreements and the forthcoming amendment to the adopted budget. And it's my sense that the staff is already preparing to do that as soon as possible. And so, is there any other questions that committee members would like to see addressed on the agenda? Hearing none, please let Alexandra know if you have any in the interim, and she'll be discussing with me and Mariah the forthcoming agenda in our discussions, and if we're have finished for this evening, I thank everybody for their attendance and their comments, and we are adjourned.
Hey, thank you all.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.